welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News.
Our first guest on today's show is a political scientist and a journalist with experience in media advocacy. He was a former managing director of the News Agency of Nigeria. He served as a political advisor to the former president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo. During the 2011 general election, he was the director of presidential campaign organization of the People's Democratic Party. He's here to discuss developments as they unfold in the lead-up to the 2019 elections and the move by the All Progressives Congress-led administration to subordinate the rule of law to national security. Akin Osuntokun, welcome to the morning show.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning,
How
sir.
are you?
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us today.
Well, before we begin to talk about rule of law and 2019 elections, let me just take you back to a recent controversy in which you were involved when you were granted an interview and the spokespersons of the president, well, Femi Adesina in particular, accused you of having said that there was a bomb blast on Salah Day and that people were killed, whereas no such thing happened. And if any such thing happened, it was not in Maiduguri, it was in another part of what really is the issue? Because I saw that and I know you and Femi are friends. So it's like, you know, you are working against the interest of your friend.
No, of course, our friendship had nothing to do with it. I was invited by Channels Television that we were doing a program on President Buhari and his performance and what recommends him for second term. And earlier in the day, it was circulated all over the media, the feat of walking for 800 meters. So actually, I imagine that the program must have been initiated by them. So normally, I get invited by channels to provide a counter perspective to whatever discussion they were going to have. So it wasn't as if, well, thereafter, you know, the way, okay, at the program, first, they showed the president walking for 800 meters. And the presenter was trying to compel me to see that as a sign of physical fitness, you know. So he kept on saying, asking me, how does he look? How does he look? I said, look, okay, he's very handsome, if that's what you want me to say, you know. So from there, he went on, they were talking about his performance in office. So they brought in the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, who then said those who are criticizing the president could not fault him on performance, that they were saying other things. So when I, of course, asked to respond to that, I said, well, that has to be a joke that we couldn't criticize Buhari on his record of performance when it's so glaringly, you know, below par. So, and I followed, taking a cue from him, I followed the trend of the three areas and said, which they said was the high point of their regime that I wanted to be scored on, namely security, economy, and anti-corruption. So on the question of security, I said that as we speak, that day I read a number of reports on, you know, violent activities in Borno State. You know, one of them, reported by Reuters, said upwards of 68 people, casualties, were killed in a village, Melari village in Borno State. Then there was another one that said 88 people were rescued by the Nigerian army on an assault. So it was, then there was somebody that was invited from London to take part in the program. So he then said, look, it was citing Maiduguri and Borno as an instance where things had returned to normal. So I took him on that, look, how can you say that you're feeding, you know, incorrect report to the people and said that as we speak, I've read reports that said 88 people were killed in a Borno village. Now, I got the figures mixed up. Instead of 68, I said 88. So that was the extent of my culpability in being wrong. Then the following day, of course, from the statements he issued, they must have been lying in wait for me. Because then it was a very lengthy statement cataloging my activities, citing, saying that, well, and when he predicated the statement on a line, the very first paragraph, he said, I said there was a bomb blast, in Maiduguri. And repeated bomb blast almost 5 times. He said it repeatedly, saying that there wasn't any bomb blast, there was not even a firecracker. The Saturday went as peacefully as it could. So I said, well, look. And then he said, made reference to my political affiliations. I've been, very critical of the government. I'm an enemy of the people, and so on and so forth, just on that account. So what I said, well, look, if you wanted to be critical of me, okay, fine. I'm also very critical of the government. So, but I then called him. I said, look, the statements you have issued, my uncle described it as incendiary. It was like inciting. So I said, well, I don't mind that. But the embellishments of, talking about bomb blast, I never said that. I said, no. He had me on record. I said it. He will send the recording, so he sent it. I called channels earlier to ask that, was it possible I mentioned bomb blast? Channel said not at all. He sent the clip or whatever. I went through it, there was nowhere I said bomb blast.
Well, with this recap, do you consider the Buhari government intolerant of free speech?
Well, yes, but much more so now. I think they went beyond being intolerant, to getting extreme by the statement that he issued at the opening of the Nigerian Bar Association conference. I mean, for a military regime, that is surprising. For him to say that. Not to talk of an elected president going with 6 months to go into an election. The highlight of democratic freedom is 6 months away. And you have the president of the country who is an elected president taking part in that election. It's coming out at this time to trash the rule of law. The rule to society, more than any other thing that society is anchored on, is the rule of law. Now you are calling the culture of the rule of law to question. That means it's beyond being shocked, So I had to look in trying to say what is behind this. This is something. This is not normal. There's something. Look, I mean, what will motivate a democratically elected president going for election in 6 months, on which there was supposed to be an expansion of the democratic freedom, and you are now constricting it? It's of course a reaction of, his earlier incumbency as military head of state. There was such a law
Decree 2 of 1984.
in which it criminalized actually reports that no matter how factual they are, that if they embarrassed the government, as military head of state, that because it's what they deem as, that is the extent of personalization of the law. So, what an elected president, and I recall that Professor Wale Soyinka was sort of commending weeks back when the IPI hosted their gathering here.
International press.
Calling him a born
Institute,
again something
IPI.
on press freedom and so on and so forth. There is tolerance of the press. Now, here you are, and he's receiving head of states from the international community. The British Prime Minister is supposed to be here today, and the British Prime Minister will read that our host has just addressed his own country, that the rule of law was going to be trashed.
Yeah.
Well,
And
let's
you
talk
also-
a little about this rule of
Yes.
law. I mean, some lawyers and some bathroom lawyers, on social media have been saying, oh yes, in situations where there are national security problems, you can suspend fundamental human rights. And I've been shocked by some of the people even making that point. And they've been citing a case by Anasari Dokubo case. But I've read the judgment of the court. I think they are taking it out of context. But I would like to know what you think.
See, whichever way you look at it, they are wrong. What you do, if you think that the situation, you are getting a very volatile, uncontrollable situation in the country, what you do is declare a state of emergency. And the procedure for declaring a state of emergency is not as if the Constitution did not anticipate a situation in which you can legitimately or rationally declare a state of emergency. It's there in the Constitution, and the procedure for doing so is plainly stated. So, if that is again, this is the kind of poverty of thoughts that is there. See, I mean, you just mentioned some people making arguments for I'm sure some lawyers.
Well, Festus Keyamo, to cite one
What do
example.
you expect him to do? He's the spokesman of the Buhari campaign.
No, but he's a senior advocate of Nigeria.
Well, he's subordinating that his profession or his career to being a politics. He has to rationalize it. I don't expect him to do anything other than that. But as I said, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's absurd. That it's absurd to the extent of it requires to investigate what really is the motive, what is behind it.
Yeah.
And what is it that has happened in Nigeria in the recent past? All that has happened, the brigandage that has happened emanated from the state, not the Nigerian public. It was the DSS that went to invade the National Assembly. If that's what you are responding to, that is not the Nigerian public. Yeah. And the man who was deputizing for you took the step of dismissing him. And then if it is all this Benue, the massacres, the daily bloodletting, all over the place, the carnage, should you hold the Nigerian public for that responsible for that? If in your own incompetence or whatever it is, you are unable to grapple with the security situation.
What do you make of the U.S. president calling the alleged statement the U.S. president made, calling our president a lifeless person? Reports say that you said the president is to blame because he does not even respect the rule of law.
Yeah, that is a legitimate ground on which to blame the president. I don't think it's legitimate for you to start getting personal about who is lifeless and who is full of life. Look, Trump is not my cup of tea. He lives a bad state in my. If there's any, he's at the hierarchy of the ladder of leaders that depresses me on a daily basis. But the remarkable thing or significant thing is that it was a contrast to the way in which the Nigerian delegation that went with Buhari to see him, it was a contrast to the report that they brought back. What we were told was Trump was starstruck. It was all over Buhari. He thought the heavens of him, the most wonderful person. And there is, you find, a patent contradiction. And you see, this gap, there's always the guilt. And less than 2 weeks ago, the Foreign Affairs Minister was telling us that the international community was supporting the re-election of President Buhari. I don't think that, well, for good or bad, Trump is the leader of the free world. That is what he said. It's not an indication of a mind that supports or wish that supports the election.
No, but Femi Adesina has responded to that. Yeah. Again, your good friend. Yeah. He says, look, that statement is not attributed. It's not an official U.S. statement. It's third-party reportage is not substantiated and that he thinks it is politically motivated.
Well, it was reported by Financial Times.
Yes, but Financial Times was
a
putting...
publication doesn't get any more respected. No. The Financial Times will not report it if it is not. Its own reputation is at stake. And what does Financial Times stand to gain?
So you are saying invariably that you agree with the view that the president is lifeless?
No, I'm not saying I agree with him. It's not for me to judge. I'm not as, impulsive or foolish as Trump. I mean, I wouldn't use those but it's typical Trump, calling Africa a shithole country. So that is his vocabulary. That is who he is. I wouldn't describe anybody as lifeless. That is being too licentious with words. But the significant thing for Nigeria and for the presidency itself is the contrast it draws between their own, the image, the report they brought back from their visit to Trump and the reality. So there is this gap. And as I said, it's also calls into question. Foreign Affairs Minister, unprompted, was telling us how this international community are swooning over Buhari for him. That is not...
Well, in addition to everything, I mean, you are also a politician. And you've been in politics for quite some time. Campaign manager, political advisor, now spokesperson for, for the Obasanjo group and all of that. Now, what's your take on the political situation in Nigeria now? The jostling for 2019, the coalition of political parties, the defections in the various political parties, and the candidates?
Well, by the deteriorating, security situation, which actually caused to question, the security of... Look, when Nigeria was in a situation of all other things being equal, elections had always been very stressful occasions. Now, when you have the volatile security situation, it sends jitters that how would this turn out, for the country. But having said that, Nigeria is evolving. There is something we call the bad pains of the country. There was, before 2015, there was never a situation, we had not experienced a situation in which there was a successful and smooth transfer of power, transition from power from an incumbency to an opposition. That happened.
We had that in 2015.
That happened. So that is a basis on which to project that it's possible to grow, the democratic culture in Nigeria. And all these things, the jostlings, but at the end of the day, there's, I don't know who to blame. Of course, the buck stops at the president's table. We have, a precipitate, security situation. And, a very divisive, the Nigerians have become so polarized, so, unyielding, and of course, like the president is not helping the situation. So, it's difficult for me to project what Nigeria will look like in the next 1 year. You never know what is going to happen, But Nigeria has a way of modeling through, lucky so far. From all the indices, the components of the political environment we have now, it's quite fraught. It's not something that you should give anybody, cause to relax or have confidence. And then, of course, the president from nowhere came up with this. What is going to be the result of coming out to tell us we are going to trash the culture of the rule of law? If it is to be meaningful, what they are telling us is want to, embark on a reign of something that akin to dictatorship, in which, of course, political opponents are going to be endangered. And the way the APC has gone about it, in the recent past with the president and things, it doesn't bode well for the country. But I don't know. But having said that, any long-term prospects of Nigeria will have to be predicated on restructuring. That is the word that people see. Look,
well, the vice president in the United States, in I think Minnesota, was saying that what Nigeria needs is not geographical restructuring. That what we need is really good governance.
Good.
And making good use of resources, building infrastructure, and that
as their own government provider, as if the government be a model of what he's saying. And of course, to be, without meaning any disrespect, there's something you call yo-yo. About a month ago, the same vice president was subscribing to restructuring. Now we are taking a U-turn on it. And talking about geographical restructuring. Look, restructuring is not anybody's adversary. The way they are erecting it. Nobody look. What we're actually talking about is restoration. It is those who took Nigeria from the 4 regions that were extant in 1966 to the present 36 mindless states. And those were the people who restructured Nigeria.
Well, those who created those states had their own arguments.
No.
I mean, in Gowon's case, it was to address the challenge of the Civil War and all of that.
Well, you have just said it, to address the challenge of the Civil War. That is not the primary function of a state, a political entity that is supposed to be a coordinate arm of the federal government. First and foremost, it should be a unit of development, of social economic development, not as a war strategy. During Abacha,
post-war strategy.
No, it was. He created those states in 1967 to break the Igbo and the eastern region. And then, of course, I come from Ekiti State. Will you attribute the states that were created by Abacha as being motivated by, the development of Nigeria?
Well, the people of Bayelsa.
It depends on your maybe
the people of Bayelsa say they are forever grateful to Abacha for creating Bayelsa State.
Well, maybe if you know his girlfriend. Or somebody, that was the extent to which the act of creating a state degenerated. Asaba was made the capital of Delta State because Mariam Babangida comes from the north. So, so these are the issues, and those states, any student of development.
But what's your own model of restructuring in Nigeria?
First, you have to agree to the principle, then you can work out the details. Right? Agree in principle that there is a need for it. And then you sit together to collaborate. So the thing about this restructuring is that you need the cooperation of those who are opposed to it for it to be successful. So the thing you do is, the flaw that I have found is that in communicating the imperative of restructuring tends to alienate people. Now, so the burden is on the champions, to bend over backwards, to make the other people realize, the utility of what you are saying. Well, we live with a daily experience of why it is inevitable. Right? The center, for instance, the presidency, the competition, the race for the center, is the most destabilizing factor in Nigerian politics. Too much power is concentrated there. Too much, disposition to impunity. Too much, There's no theory of development that says that the farther you are away from a location, the more you have the capacity to develop it. Abuja cannot develop Nigeria. Certainly not more than a government that is nearer, the people.
So you are making an argument for federalism?
Of course. Look, that is the only reasonable argument for Nigeria, right? Look, the parents who gave birth to Nigeria, namely the British, the founding fathers of Nigeria, whom no other public figure comes near the legitimacy they have and their intellectual capacity. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Awolowo, and Ahmadu Bello. They sat down for years. There were several constitutional conferences that led to the Independence Constitution. right? If you want to criticize restructuring, you must be able to criticize, to condemn, to trash the independence constitution. And that is not, yeah, empirically, and theoretically, it's that the argument for that independence constitution is almost flawless. In the face, you look at the faces of Nigeria, the 1960-66 face, there has no rival in terms of its capacity to develop the country. You look at the indices of development, the magnitude of development that took place between 1960 and 66. Subsequent phases of Nigeria are falling drastically. So, and then, of course, don't think 1966, the change we had, was not logical. It was an accident. Okay, some soldiers killed the First Republic trash. Are you now saying that we should accept that? We should normalize what was an accident, which is what the argument here.
Okay, let's leave restructuring. Now, there are about 13 leading presidential aspirants on this scene.
Yeah, let's talk about
12, I think 12 from the PDP. The latest is former Governor Jonah Gang.
I'm thinking of joining.
From Plateau. Then you have President Buhari. Then you have a long list of younger persons who also want to be president. Now, when you look at the field at this moment, who is your favorite? If you don't have a favorite, what's your short list?
Well, it's not my favorite. I mean, you have to be realistic.
Okay.
My number one priority is to ensure that Buhari doesn't return. So that is
you are against Buhari?
Oh, yes.
You have no apologies?
Why should I have any? I've never said anything to the contrary.
Okay.
I belong to the opposition. Listen, I've been criticizing him since 2003. I was perhaps the most conspicuous columnist, warning Nigeria against electing the man in 2015. And all what I've said had come true. I've been vindicated almost 100%. This is the man we are going to. All of them who even were supporting him were saying that, look, people like Shoyinka give him the benefit of the doubt, and they have all been disappointed. So, if I had a reason to oppose him before, that reason has tripled, not quadrupled. So, my first, departure point is to get him any formula that gets him out of office.
Any formula that gets him out of office. Speaking on that, yeah. you speak on the imperative of a third force, right? Mm-hmm. This is in rescuing the country from the clutches of destructive politics. I'm quoting you here. And it shouldn't be associated with the APC and the PDP. What do you mean by this? So you want a separate party that is different from the APC and the PDP, and you think that that's the party that would...
But idealism collides with reality. Yeah. Ideally speaking, neither APC or PDP should be supported for election in 2019. But we also have to, deal with the reality of the situation is that, to a large extent, that third option, the third force option, doesn't seem realistic now.
Okay.
So the next best thing, the least of the evils, is probably, PDP in coalition with the other political groups and parties it has come into, it's working with. So, well, this is me wishing for, you have to start, it's aspirational, what I said, and it's aspirational, especially, and we had actually anticipated this, what people now call third force, by about, how many years? Almost 20 years. Myself, Ruben, Shegun Awolowo, Fanika Ode,
Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi, the The Fagbai sisters.
Exactly, you know, Adoke.
Debola and the sister.
Even this man who was he's the communications minister. And
Shegun Awolowo. Shegun Awolowo was part
of
of
course.
our group. Yeah.
You know, that this Shitu,
Shitu.
we didn't know him at that time.
Yeah.
You know, so we had already.
You have left out our friend Opeyemi Agbaje.
Olisa Ogbakova,
Oh, yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Abubakar Umar, you know.
That was a progressive action.
Exactly, well, you know, this was anticipated, but of course, you know, the realities of Nigerian politics, the vagaries of Nigerian politics, you know, didn't allow it to go. And maybe we didn't show enough commitment.
Anyway,
So
I'll come back to the issue of PAM, okay? But you were going to talk about the candidates.
The candidates,
and to
correct.
tell us who and who you prefer.
Listen, first and foremost, look, the irreducible minimum for me is for Buhari to go. So I really don't care who emerges as the candidate of the opposition. What worries me, my own concern, is the ability to manage the aftermath, you know, of the primaries, you know, in which there will be losers and only one winner. You know, this is what I'm working towards. Any of those on the platform that I've seen so far, you know, for me, not any of them is better than what we have today.
Oh, even when the APC is saying there's no alternative to Buhari.
Well, you know, that is the kind of, you know, harebrained.
But you are close to President Obasanjo.
Oh, yes.
I know that as your friend. And people are saying that Baba is interested in Senator Kwankwanso, who has just been denied the opportunity to even use the Eagle Square.
Yes, you see, Kwankwanso, I have my reservations about him. But there was a talking session we had on this issue of those, and I said, look, the most realistic candidate, or the candidate that will give Buhari, you know, the virtue of his life and prevail over him, is that aspirant whom Buhari and this government are most hostile to. That is the fear. And so far, it seems as if it is this guy. Whether Kwankwanso.
Yeah, they just prevented him from using the
That is a
Square.
test. That's an indication of his strength. You know, of how that is fair. He's the one they fear most. You don't do that to somebody you consider a non-threat to you. You don't do that. And I've actually said, well, it's a negative way to find out who the right candidate is. But going by that formula, that the person that it is the person that you fear most that you do that to, which then makes him as more or less the front runner. I mean, you don't do that to somebody you don't think can give you any problem. I have my reservations about Kwankwanso, but as I said, I'm proceeding from the premise of the irreducible minimum, you know, and to have a realistic, you know, aspiration, and not to have any illusions, you know, about how to realize the goal that you have set for yourself. I'm not going to. The practical purpose of politics is the attainment of power, you know. So, if that is the objective, along the way you have to, you know, do the necessary things, you know, the adult,
one last issue. I mean, when we started with PAM 20 years ago, the whole idea was to mobilize a lot of young people into politics. And it probably worked. You know, some of our people ended up in government, some sought elected positions. But now, it's become very fashionable for young people to say they even want to be president. What do you think their chances are? The Showores of this world, Duro Toye, Kingsley Moghalu, so many of them, about 40-something.
So unfortunately, they are non-starters. But
they are what?
Non-starters.
How?
They are not. given what is on ground, you know, I don't see how, but again, that's not a scientific statement. We have not conducted an opinion poll. But just looking at why is everybody going to PDP to contest? Why is it that it is the PDP that is the center of a coalition and none of them has any status? They are good candidates. They are in an ideal situation. One of them should be the president. But 90% of 0 is 0.
Well, you know, you still did not answer Dr. Abati's question. Who do you think is the strongest candidate?
The strongest?
Let me put it directly at you.
No, there is no way of determining who the strongest candidate is. What I've done, you know, in place of that, is to highlight whom the Buhari people consider, from the way they have been behaving, consider the toughest. Probably Saraki, you know. Well, you know, the three, maybe I can take this liberty.
Okay.
Okay, the three leading candidates by my own record, or four, in the PDP are Kokonso, Saraki, Atiku, and Tambuwa.
Tambuwa. Okay.
Well, on that note, we'll have to let you go. You know, thank you very much,
thank you so
for
much
coming
for
to the
joining us
morning
on
show.
this segment.
We'll be inviting you again because you have very strong views and you have no apologies.
Why not? It's time now for a short break. When we return, we'll have the Vice President of the Nigerian Football Federation, NFF, Seyi Akinwumi, here to discuss the upcoming NFF election and more. Stay with us.